Hello and welcome to The Film Angle. I'm Chris,
And I'm Alex.
and thank you for tuning in with us so far. If you've listened to the last two episodes, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it, and hopefully we can keep growing on that goodwill a little bit further when we get into this episode. Last week we had a little chat about the Oscars, didn't we, Alex?
Yeah, well, it wasn't very little. It was quite a long chat about the Oscars, I would say.
Yeah, it was sort of it kind of went on a little bit. If you actually were present during the conversation, I think we recorded over 2 hours of content. Whether that content was good or not, we'll let you guys decide. But I managed to whittle it down and kind of get a bit more better grip of what we were talking about in that episode.
Yeah, no, I think you did a really good job on the edit, and obviously, I think maybe we give our listeners a bit of a respite with a film's worth of episode last week, and maybe go for something a bit shorter. And we're gonna focus in on one subject today, which is the card counter.
Yes, the card counter, which is directed by the famous Paul Schrader. A lot of you might not be familiar with the name Paul Schrader, but you've probably seen something that's got his influence in him. Paul Schrader is a longtime collaborator with Martin Scorsese. You're probably familiar with Paul's writing whenever he wrote Taxi Driver, which is a monumental film. I mean, pretty much everybody's seen that, and it's always in the back of your mind. And Paul sort of likes to explore these themes of redemption, loneliness, and sort of hope, and that's still present in the movie today. Like the card counter, we're talking 40 years later, and Paul Schrader is still making movies about that same topic.
Yeah, it seems he loves to kind of question whether the irredeemable human can be redeemed, and I think that definitely follows here in the card counter.
Yeah, so the card counter it's another tale of redemption, as we said, but it's something Schrader's no stranger to. As it's clear, he's been obsessed with themes of guilt, of retribution, and yes, plenty of personal diary monologue voiceovers to tick all the Schrader boxes. Yeah, the card counter definitely carries on that same tradition.
Okay, Chris, I will go through the synopsis of the film, and we can talk about a few things as I go through it. Stop me at any time if there's any points that you want to make, listeners. This is for you, so you know what happens in the film. Obviously, if you want to watch the film and come back, that's absolutely fine. We are going to go pretty deep into what happens. If you don't have any interest in the film, but you're interested in our thoughts on it, then yeah, we're gonna go through what happens as well. So we start the film with narration that goes on throughout the film from Oscar Isaac's character William Tell, who explains that he taught himself to count cards during an 8-year stint in military prison, and he now travels to different casinos around the country, betting small, winning modestly, but also bizarrely wrapping up every item in the motels he stays in white sheets. Gives major serial killer vibes. The film does not go down that route. At one of the casinos, he encounters a woman he has met before in passing, Lalinda, played by Tiffany Haddish,
Yeah.
who's yeah, this is really against type for her, wouldn't you say, Chris?
Yeah, we're used to seeing Haddish play these sort of big, larger than life roles. I especially refer to Girls Trip. I don't know if you guys have seen that movie, but she plays a really loud role in that, and she's hilarious. She's funny, and she's hot Hollywood property at the minute. But yeah, this is a lot more stripped back performance for her, and a lot more delicate. And it's quite fascinating. I think she handles it really, really well, and her and Isaac make a really good match together.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen her in anything like this. It's always been the kind of loud comedic role. She kind of had like a Melissa McCarthy moment, like after Melissa McCarthy did Bridesmaids, like she was the
Yeah.
hottest property for every comedy film, typecast. And I really love seeing her in this, taking a more dramatic turn, but also kind of one of the lighter characters in the film, and kind of brings a definite lightness to the heavy kind of themes, as we'll go on to discuss.
Yeah, it's quite interesting casting somebody like Haddish because you sort of know her sort of getup in previous films that she's been in. So you kind of go in when you meet this character, and obviously she runs a poker stable, which is a pool of poker players that she hires, and when they win, they give her a cut of the money, and it's a sort of relationship between the head honcho and her players. But you sort of expect her to kind of turn into. I expected her to almost to turn into a villain because she's so honest and approachable for somebody who's in his profession, and it really catches you off guard. So I kind of had that in the back of my mind this whole way, and I was really pleasantly surprised when she was again going against typecast, and it made a pretty interesting dynamic into the movie.
I think Schrader writes a lot of characters in this film in a certain way that makes you think, oh, we're going to head down that route, and then it doesn't. Like
A
it
lot of
completely
misdirection, sure.
a lot of misdirection with the characters and what you expect to happen in this kind of film.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of mystery as well, especially surrounding Isaac's character, like you mentioned. I mean, the guy goes to every motel room, doesn't like plush settings. He strips it back. He covers everything with white sheeting. At the first point in the movie, we don't really know why. We can make assumptions as to why, but it's quite interesting to watch a character organically bloom throughout a film in a very insular way, where we really aren't told any information. And this is a theme in Schrader's work where we got to really fill in the missing blank spaces and kind of come to a conclusion as where we are with the characters, and it's quite interesting. This movie has some moments that really catch you off guard.
So going back to the story, Linda, as you mentioned, runs a stable, and she offers to take William on board, but he declines. Then we kind of skip to another casino, and it's revealed that a security industry convention is also being held. And William notices a poster for a seminar held by Major John Gordo, which again, he kind of looks at it in a certain way that he may be aware of this person, and he kind of slips into that seminar. He doesn't stay throughout the whole thing, and he decides to leave not before a young man, Kirk, who's played by Ty Sheridan, slips him his name and number, expressing that he wants to talk about Major John Gordo, who they were just watching. And it's also probably worth mentioning as well that John Gordo is played by none other than Willem Dafoe.
Of course he is. I mean, we were first introduced to Gordo's character played by Defoe by not actually seeing him. We hear that iconic Willem Dafoe voice as the camera pans on Oscar Isaac as he takes a chair. You can instantly tell that voice from a mile away. It's always welcomed whenever Willem Dafoe shows up in a movie. I'll take it when I can.
Oh, he's incredible, and he kind of rounds off this like cast of characters where you've got Oscar Isaac, Tiffany Haddish, Ty Sheridan, and Willem Dafoe, and all of them are incredible. It's quite the main cast for a
Yeah,
film.
Sheridan's a really surprising choice too. I mean, he's been in little parts in lots of movies over the last 10 or so years, but yeah, like most people would know him for Ready Player One, and he's good at that sort of thing. But I'm really surprised that he can really tap into a character in this. He's really sort of he's disassociated, he's angry, and it's justifiably so. But Oscar Isaac's character William Tell can see himself in this young person, and that's really where this the plot really starts to boil up and get going.
Yeah, I mean, just going back quickly to Ty Sheridan, I almost didn't recognize him. He like it's a really mature role for him to take on,
Mm.
and yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I completely forgot it was the same guy in Ready Player One.
Yeah, his hair is a lot longer, isn't it?
Yeah, he completely disappears into this role. I remember him best from Mud when he was a lot younger,
Oh, the
and I
McConaughey film. That's
yeah,
great.
I
Yeah.
love that film. So I've kind of always had my eye on him since then because I really really enjoyed that film. But yeah, no, here he's yeah completely different, and yeah, really really takes on this role. So after this seminar, we cut back to well, we don't cut back anywhere. We cut to a nightmare that Oscar Isaac is having, which is a
Yeah.
nightmare slash flashback of a prison camp where torture is essentially being performed. Lots of heavy rock music and horrible things
Oh
happening.
yeah, it is like being bashed over. I mean, if you were falling asleep in the movie at this point, it definitely woke you up again.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and it's worth mentioning. So far on this film, we've had a very kind of ethereal soundtrack. So much so, and so much so that I looked up who did the score because I was like, this sounds like Cliff Martinez because it sounded like Drive. I was like, a beat to this and a breathing that I was just like, Cliff Martinez must have done this score. He didn't, but they had to have been inspired by Drive because it is a very Drive kind of score to the whole
Mm.
thing.
I mean, we talked about the white sheeting in the motel room, but and that was sort of like the first sort of thematic thing that really gets you going, thinking about what's going on in the movie with this character. But the soundtrack was the second thing that you get these whispers, these voices, these breaths, underlying the soundtrack all the time that really get you thinking. I mean, are these voices that we're hearing in the soundtrack, are these memories, are these thoughts, are what is going on with this? And it's only when the film kind of gets going that you really understand what the soundtrack's going for. But it's a fascinating choice, one of the movie's strengths for sure.
Yeah, which is why the prison camp scene is almost completely jarring because it
Mhm.
completely knocks you sideways from what you've already experienced. Heavy rock music, loud noises, shouting, screaming, blood, sweat, and tears. Yeah, it's not nice.
Yeah,
It's
the
filmed.
camera, yeah, the way the shot is filmed, it's almost like watching. It's like watching a VR video without having the VR on, and it's not formatted for it. So it's this really ugly fisheye lens, this tunnel vision that kind of really gets. It feels like you're on drugs.
Yeah. So when Oscar Isaac wakes up from this, he calls Kirk and he agrees to meet him. And Kirk informs him that he knows who he really is, which is a soldier that was tried and convicted for his role in torture and prisoner abuse. He explains that his father was also in the same prison camp, performing a similar role to Oscar Isaac's character,
Mhm.
and he was also dishonorably discharged. This is where we find out why Oscar Isaac was in prison, serving time, but Kirk's dad's experience kind of led him to drug addiction, and he became abusive and violent towards Kirk's mother, who left him,
Mhm.
and eventually his dad killed himself. So
Well, we're painting a pretty bleak picture at the minute.
yeah, I mean, but that's his motivation
Oh,
for
absolutely.
revenge, which is what he kind of tells William, is that like Gordo, Major John Gordo, is the guy who kind of trained them, but he was a civilian consultant and therefore kind of avoided any wrongdoing or any charges when it was revealed what was going on in the prison camp.
This replicates history in general, where I mean, this Gordo conditioned his soldiers to doing this. It was his show, but like the big wigs in history and military history past, he avoided the situation. Oscar Isaac and many of his other colleagues took the fall, and yeah, Gordo's still doing conventions and pretending that none of it happened and still raking in the money. And there's lots of injustice there, and we can really understand why these two characters are very angry. Um,
Yeah, and Gordo holds the major title despite not being a major. So it's all this kind of boisterous ruse that he's carrying with him.
and seems completely unfazed by the past. You know, we can sort of see that in Defoe's demeanor. That's something that makes Defoe such a good casting choice. Is that he can be both light, very likable, empathetic, but he can also be a bit of a bastard sometimes too. I mean, he's no stranger to acting very cold and unpleasant, and yeah, he is.
Yeah, unpleasant with a smile,
Oh, yeah,
which has made
like a
him
grinning shark.
yeah, which has made him such an interesting villain in many pieces,
Mhm.
and you can really understand why Kirk wants to. Well, he says he wants to take revenge, he wants to torture and kill him, and he basically says to Oscar Isaac, "Why don't you help me out?" And Oscar Isaac obviously says no.
Yet he comes back to him later, only say, "Do you want to go for a road trip with me?" The kid's got nowhere to go. He's not talking to his mother at the minute for various reasons, and he's avoiding home. He's basically a runaway. Oscar Isaac says, "Hey, I'm lonely anyway. Can you come? You can come with me. Come on my tours. We'll go across the country to different casinos." Not really. What's the point of all this? We don't really know. There's an aimlessness, but we know that Oscar Isaac is he's contemplating the proposition that Sheridan's character is giving him.
Yeah, and Ty Sheridan kind of tells him, "Oh, I'm a bit of an investigative journalist, or I'm trying to do this." So there's almost like a promise of like maybe I'll drop some breadcrumbs along the way. In one of the casinos, as they kind of perform this road trip, he meets back up with Lalinda and says to her, "Hey, I will do what you asked. I would like to make a bit of money, but
Yeah.
it's not for me. It's for this kid. I want to kind of help him cover his debts and start a new life, and then I'm going to retire." And she kind of puts him into like the World Series of poker,
Hmm.
and they begin traveling to kind of make some money.
We're wondering this whole time why it suddenly is Isaac's character. Why is Tell so invested in this young man? Why is he so emotionally invested that he wants to do such a big act where he wants to go out of his comfort zone, go into a big World Series, get his money, run away, give the kid all the money. It's fascinating. That's something that kind of blossoms throughout the film too.
I think there's an element of regret from Tell. I think he well, there's definitely regret. He's doing this because he knows he's irredeemable. But I
Mhm.
think Ty Sheridan is like a glimmer of hope that maybe I can redeem myself through this guy who's going down a route of revenge, which can
Yeah.
only end badly. And maybe if I can help him, maybe that means that there is some hope left for me. That's how I saw it. I think like going back to him wrapping up everything in sheets in his motels. I really do think that the reason for him doing that is to kind of get back that life that he had in prison that was just routine. Like he's going places, he's counting cards, he's making enough money to live, and he goes back to his very plain room, which is, it's everything looks like it does in every motel because he's covered it in these white sheets. He wants to torture himself. Essentially, he feels like he needs to be punished for the things he's done, and I think Kirk it brings an element of hope that maybe I am redeemable, and that's what the film explores.
Yeah, for sure. My reading was exactly the same on that point. He is using Kirk to do the things he can't do or he can't bring himself to do, and it maybe if he can get Kirk to do them, or it can help Kirk and really come full circle on Kirk's journey, then he can maybe have a little bit of peace and can, I don't know, come to some sort of resolve. I kind of want to talk about Paul Schrader a little bit, just while we are talking about the plot. Yeah, I mean, while we're talking about this, Schrader was obviously he was born in Michigan to a very religious family, and it's just interesting to talk about this because religion just seems to be a concurrent theme in all of his films, where redemption, as we're talking about, really comes into play. So he was born to a very religious family. His mother Joan and Charles Schrader, so much so that he wasn't actually allowed to even see a film until he was 17. Well, he
Wow.
wasn't allowed. He managed to sneak out of his home and sneak his way into a cinema and experience his first film for the first time. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, I mean that puts a lot of expectation on the film, like because I kind of have a few thoughts about what my first film might have been, but you're so young that it just happens to you, and it's not this big experience that you kind of dwell on. Can you imagine? Like, do you know what the first film was that he saw?
I do. And I'm surprised his career ended up being what it was after his first exposure. His first film was a Disney production, which was sort of like a typical '60s production, like The Parent Trap, one of those. But it was The Absent-Minded Professor, which
Okay.
was a 1961 production. Not well regarded movie in the Disney pantheon, as soon as far as I'm aware. Schrader even stated that he was, quote, very unimpressed.
Oh man,
So the
I'm surprised.
natural, yeah, the natural odds were sort of against him from pursuing the career, but hey, here we are.
Wow. Yeah, that's very interesting. Very interesting.
He went on record, like, I mean, I think we've heard him in various interviews. He likes to kind of dwell on his past and why he likes films, because he has a really knowledgeable sense of movies. He's got a real database. He's the guy's seen essentially everything, but he's went on record to say that he's never that his love of movies really came from more an intellectual angle as opposed to an emotional point of view, as he had, because he had no adolescent memories of watching movies, so he didn't have the nostalgic connection that, say, you and I would have, that really cemented our love of films. So it's quite interesting, and that kind of that's kind of rippled in his movies even today.
Yeah, you can see why he's written some of the things he's done then, because they really push the boundaries of stories that can be told on film and characters we haven't seen before. Yeah, you can understand why he wasn't looking to recreate a feeling of cinema that he'd
Mm,
seen before, but more kind of push it into something new. And now we find today a lot of filmmakers and creators are probably emulating the stuff that he's done or he's written because you know
yeah,
they're masterpieces.
he's much more interested in Christianity and theology more than anything, and those redemptive arcs. And film is more a medium to explore those thoughts that he has, and sort of the thoughts aren't new in any way. I mean, I think his last film, First Reformed, and this film, The Card Counter, are very similar in their journeys, but he just likes to plop us in different scenarios and just see how different people cope with those theological sort of contentions, those ideas that they're wrestling with.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense as to why him and Scorsese teamed up for quite a few films. They 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 definitely vibe together.
Yeah, I mean, he wrote the screenplay for Scorsese's other film, The Last Temptation of Christ, as well. So,
Yep.
yeah, we definitely know what Schrader is concerned with and what his mind is on, and he can't get his mind off it. And it's just, but you know what? He does it really well, and I think he does explore it in a way that isn't preachy, that we can really fill in the gaps as an audience and really bring our own sense of um, Christ or theological, hang-ups or lack of direction, and really bring that to the film as well as the movie. It's like our thoughts and the movie's thoughts meet halfway, and it really makes you wrestle within yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Should we get back into the meat and bones?
Yeah, so as they tour around, William feels like a growing attraction to Lalinda, but kind of doesn't pursue it. I guess he
Yeah,
doesn't feel like he
he deserves it.
deserves
Hmm.
love.
Hmm.
And but Kurt kind of tries to push him towards maybe asking her out, but he doesn't feel like he should.
Yeah, I think that's a theme really in general. I mean, Tell just doesn't really give himself any indulgences. I think the only indulgence he gives himself throughout the film is the guy likes a good glass of whiskey.
He's constantly as he's touring as well, is constantly taunted by a Ukrainian player who's taken on the mantle of Mr. USA,
My
and
goodness.
yeah, every time you see him, he makes a move, and his kind of his gang of cronies all chant USA USA, which made me giggle every time. But
Oh yeah, me too. Me too.
it's almost like it's taunting Oscar Isaac. Like what he's done, the torture he's performed is in the name of the US. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yes.
almost like this patriotism, this kind of tacky
Misguided.
patriotism, tacky patriotism
Mm.
that kind of is probably not what he was doing stuff for, or maybe there's a guilt that he's kind of informed this sense of tacky patriotism, this kind of darker side to the states that is a lot more apparent now than it used to be.
Yeah, I mean this Mr. USA guy probably appears in about several scenes, but we hear no dialogue from him and his entourage apart from USA USA, and I had a similar reaction to you where I did sort of giggle to myself for the movie. But yeah, you can really understand that why that would taunt Isaac's character William Tell. It's a very interesting choice, and I think the movie kind of needed it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was listening to an interview with Paul Schrader, and he said he wrote that character as a misdirect, like we were talking about earlier. It was supposed to be a character that you, as the audience, is supposed to be like, "Oh, he's gonna get him at the end." You know, at the end of this, he'll beat him and he'll win. But that never happens, and he is more of a kind of lurking presence than any form of antagonist, as the film might lead you to believe.
Oh, that's such a typical Schrader trait. He loves to really throw you a scent and drag you the wrong way and kind of hit you over the head at the end. But yeah, that is actually really interesting. Like I guess I fell for that during the movie. I was expecting the big payoff, but it's only when the movie kind of goes on a bit more where you kind of realize that that's not really what's important here. It's more the internal journey and everything.
Going back to the journey, Kirk basically shares to William that he still plans to kill Gordo even after all this time, and Oscar Isaac decides to take a route in convincing him otherwise in a way that I guess only he knows how to do. He invites Kirk into his motel room, which is covered in the sheets, as it always is. If I was Kirk, I'd be out of there in a shot. But he sits him down and basically turns on his interrogator persona.
Oh boy, this was a hard scene. Like I was on the edge of my seat. My throat was in my mouth.
Yeah, basically, it looks like he's about to torture Kirk. He's really commanding. Like Oscar Isaac plays a very quiet.
Oh yeah.
You know, he's very intuitive and intelligent. You could tell, but he doesn't display a grandiose or any kind of.
Mhm.
He likes to be back in the shadows. He likes to keep his. He likes to keep himself distance. He
Yeah,
doesn't want to
he's
stand
under
out.
lock and key, isn't he? He's under lock and key the whole time. He's keeping that persona. We know that he's capable of doing horrendous things, obviously from his past, and we've seen the backflash, where any sane person who is empathetic or didn't he would not put themselves in a position. So we know that he has that within him. So that made the scene and the guy's a mystery. So that makes the scene even more uncomfortable because we just like Sheridan have no idea where this is going to go.
Yeah, this scene like you said, it's a hard watch, but it is my favorite scene of the film because Oscar Isaac really switches it on here, and you really believe that he could have done some terrible things. Essentially, he intimidates Kirk, but he gets out all this money, hundreds and thousands of pounds from his gambling winnings, and says, you're going to pay off your debts. You're going to call your mum and you're going to return to her and pay off her debts and you're going to return to college.
Hmm.
Forget about Gordo. You take this money and leave, or else, essentially. We're not
Yeah,
sure what the or else is, but it's pretty intimidating. So
yeah,
Kirk basically goes, "Oh, okay, I will. I will. I'll go call my mum." And he takes the money and he
yeah.
leaves.
It seems sincere as well. You really feel like right that he really got through to this guy and really woke him up.
I feel like it's the only way he knew how to convince somebody of something
Yeah,
was to go down the dark route.
yeah,
Because
of course.
I don't think he has or feels like he could become a father figure, although it starts to turn that way. I don't think he believes he can nicely do something because he doesn't feel that he can. He's too far gone for that. Yeah, it's a really interesting scene.
Yeah, for sure. Which really makes the resolution at the end even more heartbreaking and really, to be honest, a real shocker for me. I didn't expect the plot to go the way it does. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened there?
Yeah, so it's basically the finals of this poker tournament, and he receives a message from Kirk of the front of Gordo's house. It's worth mentioning that there is a scene slightly before this where Kirk describes Google Maps to Oscar
Oh,
Isaac, which is a bit of an odd scene and maybe shows Schrader's age.
yeah, there's a couple of moments like that, yeah, and even when Kirk is FaceTiming William Tell on the phone, like to show him that he rang his mum and said, "Hey mum, I'm sorry, I want to come home." It seems it seems a bit like Oscar Isaac's more like a 90-year-old man as opposed to a guy who's in pre-middle age.
Yeah, nobody needs to explain Google Maps to anybody in 2022, I don't think. Uh,
Yeah, yeah.
but in doing this, they find Gordo's house. So we are aware of what the front of his house looks, and it's just a message from Kirk that says, "Wish you were here," with that picture of the front of his house. He
Yes.
leaves the poker tournament and tries
Right
to
in right in the middle
right in the
of
middle.
is supposed to be, as we were talking earlier, supposed to be the payoff between him and Mr. USA. It's both them, only them two left on the table, fighting it out one on one in the big World Series. Right in the middle of the game, he leaves his table and makes a beeline straight for Kirk.
Yeah, which is I guess he tries to get hold of him, doesn't, and chucks on a news report where we find out that somebody tried to get into Gordo's home, and Gordo shot and killed him.
Oh, it's heartbreaking. I mean, it's such a unsatisfying moment for someone who's watching the movie because not only you don't get you get no catharsis from that.
No.
The young guy he didn't get the happy ending. He didn't go to college, but we don't even get to see him at our moment when we say goodbye didn't feel like a goodbye. Yeah, he's ripped apart from the movie, and you feel that loss.
He's not even named in the news report. He's just the person breaking in got killed. The film doesn't even make an attempt to kind of like assure you, like, yeah, that's definitely Kirk. You were just led to assume,
Yeah.
put one and two together.
And
It's
it's sad
Kirk.
that this kid's lasting legacy is that he was an attempted murderer, and instead we get Gordo as glorified for his heroism for defending the attack, which probably fuels Tell's character even more.
Yeah. So Tell decides to head off. I mean, he's been building up a relationship with Linda by this point. They've gone on this kind of
Yeah,
sightseeing,
they've got a good thing
uh,
going on.
light extravaganza in Vegas. I think it was Vegas, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah, that's
He
right.
leaves all this behind to go to Gordo's house, and the next thing we see is Willem Dafoe, Gordo, walking into his house, which has been covered in white sheets.
Yeah, but we know we are down for some intense stuff going on here now.
Yeah. So basically, he says, "Do you remember me?" Defoe doesn't really get it at first, and then he kind of says, I was in this prison camp. You trained me, and I spent a lot of time in prison because of you. It's worth saying as well that he's holding him at gunpoint at this point, and
Yeah, and we get a half-hearted apology from Defoe, like, "Oh, gee, that's rough, buddy."
yeah,
Sort of.
yeah, yeah, and basically says, "All right, let's do some reenactments. Only one of us is coming out of only one of us is coming out alive here."
Mhm.
They head into another room, and the camera does not follow. All you
Good
hear,
choice. Good choice, from Schrader, really. I would I think it would have tilted the movie in a weird direction if we actually got to see these 2 guys going at it.
yeah, I think it would have been too gratuitous, and
Mhm.
instead you just hear the cries and yelps of pain, and soon Telk walks back into frame, bloodied, phone in his hand, and he calls the police to report a homicide. And next thing
Yeah.
you know, he's in prison.
Arguably, probably where he wants to be.
Yeah, I don't think he's sad about it. The only thing different here is he gets a visitor, Lalinda. She sees him, and in the final shot of the film, they both place a single finger on the glass, separating them in the visitor's room,
Yeah.
and credits roll as they have this kind of weirdly touching moment together.
Yeah, did you find that moment touching? or did it catch you off guard? I find it quite powerful and kind of really. I then got in that moment what Schrader was doing with her character.
Yeah, I think for me, and let me know what your thoughts are on this, Chris. But
Yeah,
it was kind of a glimmer of, yep, you've done wrong, but there is some hope for you.
yeah.
You found love in this process. You are redeemable. You're not wholly bad.
That sort of mirrored with Schrader's last movie, First Reformed. Amanda Seyfried plays a very similar character who he likes to depict women as sort of angelic figures that can come into our main characters' lives and kind of uplift them from a situation. He really believes in sort of a maternal figure, and he definitely emulates that here with Haddish. They have a really touching moment. That well, to put a pun lightly. They literally touch fingers, but it's a launch shot that seems very sweeping. In a movie that's quite claustrophobic, I think the same thing happened in First Reformed. It ended with our main character having a big long kiss that felt like the longest kiss in cinema, where the camera, where it was claustrophobic for it, the whole thing suddenly panned and swooped around and circled the two main characters, and there's this sort of true love is sort of redeemable in itself, and anybody can be loved and redeemed.
Yeah, it's love is the savior for Paul Schrader. Love is
Hmm.
the redeemer, and that's very much shown in that shot. It's actually quite interesting how many parallels this draws with First Reformed. Paul Schrader definitely has a type of film that he likes to write, and a type of human that he likes
Oh
to
yeah,
kind of point a camera at and really get into the gritty details of whether those people can be redeemed.
yeah,
Personally, as we've kind of wrapped up the card counter here,
yeah.
I enjoyed the card counter, but I think he did a much better job with it in First Reformed. Um,
He, I think that's partially due to him. He is telling a very similar story this time around. He has he has a little bit of help with the fact that the character in First Reformed is focused on a pastor, which is inherently easier to hone in on those religious themes a little bit more than it is to say a poker player. So the stage is very similar in what he's trying to tell. It's just the pieces and the costumes and the whole set decoration is different this time. It's kind of like he's trying to plan a trilogy here. I think he's planning a third film that kind of explores the similar themes again, but with someone else.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd be interested to see what kind of progressive route he goes down with First Reformed being about global warming,
Yeah,
and this one being about torture and kind of the methods used by the states in war, which kind of contradicts some of his less progressive views on Facebook. Sometimes he does sound like a bit of an old man shouting into a void, but it is interesting to see that he's taken some themes here and really interrogated them. Pardon the pun.
hmm,
And I think he does a good job in both. But yeah, no, I'm very interested to see Paul Schrader's redemption trilogy, if that is the case.
yeah, catch up with the card counter. It's a fantastic movie. Um, First of all, catch up with First Reformed as well. Those both are really good bookends to each other. But yeah, I think that sort of wraps it up for now on the card counter. Please let us know what you think. If you did watch the movie, or you did like it, or you didn't like it, make sure to comment on our Instagram page or on our letterbox account. So it'd be really interesting to know what you think about it.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And it is streaming on. It's streaming right now on like Amazon Prime and YouTube and stuff like that, so you can buy it there.
Okay, so I think next week we're doing something sort of different again, aren't we, Alex?
Yeah, well, I think it's quite nice to keep playing with these formats whilst we're still a young podcast and seeing how
Yeah,
people react. So yeah, definitely. That's why we really encourage your feedback. But also, I think we like to mix it up because it's always good to kind of chat about different things. But we're going to go for a bit of a list, maybe a listicle or a list
yeah,
cast. I don't know what you'd call a listicle in podcast form. But
something like that. We'll play around with that a little bit more.
but we're gonna look at our favorite comfort films,
Yes.
and I think that's going to create maybe some different discussion on some films that maybe aren't as prestige as the films we've spoken about so far.
I think if we're talking about my list, I think that could be definitely a guarantee. So it's going to be top five comfort movies that we sort of cling to. It can be, we can play around with the rules of that a little bit, but the real gimmick here, I think it's fair to call it a gimmick, is that both of us don't know each other's picks. So we are going to go into this completely fresh and really get to know each other and what makes us really tick. Because I think a comfort movie is something you watch all the time, so it really speaks volumes as to who you are as a person and what you sort of cling to make you feel good.
Yeah, what film do you put on when maybe you're feeling a bit down to cheer
Hmm.
you up? What
Hmm.
film makes you feel an instant way from the first second? That's how I'm really going to go into my list
Yeah, I'm going to be
and
really honest
look
here
into
too.
it. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, and I think maybe it'll provide some different kinds of films to talk about. So looking forward to doing that with you next week, Chris.
For sure, for sure. Well, I think we'll wrap it up for now. As always, you can tune in to us next week. We are posting episodes on Wednesdays, so please tune into that one. For now, this is the Film Angle, and I'm Chris.
And I'm Alex.
Thanks, guys.